My name is Ethan Mitchell, 32 years old, and I've spent my entire life as my sister Kimberly's personal scapegoat. Every broken dish, every missed opportunity, every disappointment in her life somehow became my fault. For 27 years, I defended myself, tried to prove my innocence, and begged for fairness. Then one day, after she sabotaged my wedding, something in me snapped. I decided to stop fighting and give her exactly what she wanted. I had no idea it would completely destroy her life. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how giving my sister exactly what she wanted finally freed us both. Growing up in suburban Boston, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. Our father Robert worked as a financial analyst, and our mother Elizabeth managed a successful boutique downtown. Both had demanding careers that kept them busy, often leaving Kimberly and me to figure things out on our own after school. I was 5 when I first noticed the pattern. Kimberly, 3 years older, had knocked over her juice at breakfast. Before our parents even turned around, she was pointing at me. "Ethan bumped the table," she claimed confidently. Mom sighed, handed me a paper towel, and told me to be more careful. I remember the confusion I felt. I hadn't moved, hadn't done anything. But at 5 years old, I didn't have the words to defend myself effectively. By the time I was 7, these incidents were happening almost daily. A missing toy was. Ethan took it. A dent in the car door was. Ethan was playing too rough. Homework not completed was because. Ethan kept bothering me. Each time, I'd deny it, sometimes crying in frustration, but Kimberly's stories always seemed more believable. The defining moment came when I was 8. Mom had a beautiful crystal vase, a wedding gift from her grandmother. One afternoon while our parents were working in the yard, I heard a crash from the living room. I rushed in to find Kimberly standing over the shattered vase, her face pale with worry. When our parents ran in, she was already in tears. Ethan was running in the house. She sobbed. I told him to stop, but he wouldn't listen, and he knocked it over. I stood there, mouth open, having just entered the room myself. That's not true. I was in my room. I didn't do anything. Dad looked at the scene, then at me with disappointment. Ethan, we've told you not to run in the house. Go to your room. But I didn't do it. I protested, tears welling up. Don't make it worse by lying, Mom said firmly. Go to your room now. That night, I heard Kimberly get extra ice cream for being such a good sister, despite being upset about what happened. The injustice burned in my chest, but I had no way to prove my innocence. When I was 10, I finally tried to stand up for myself. Kimberly had taken money from Mom's purse to buy candy with her friends, but claimed I must have taken it when I was caught with a chocolate bar, one she had actually given me from her stash. This time, I didn't just deny it, I called her a liar. The resulting fallout was devastating. Kimberly cried for hours, saying I was being mean to her because I was jealous. My parents grounded me for 2 weeks, one for allegedly taking the money and another for being cruel to my sister. That night, Kimberly came to my room with a smug smile. "Nobody will ever believe you over me," she whispered. "You might as well stop trying." Something inside me broke that day. I began to withdraw, to accept the role I'd been assigned in our family. I became quieter, more careful, documenting my whereabouts and activities in a small notebook I kept hidden under my mattress, my only defense against future accusations. My self-esteem suffered. At school, I became hesitant to participate, afraid of drawing attention or making mistakes. I developed anxiety about breaking rules or disappointing authorities. I began to wonder if maybe there was something wrong with me, something that made me deserving of blame. By the time I reached middle school, the pattern was firmly established. Kimberly was the perfect daughter, responsible, charming, and always ready with an explanation when things went wrong. I was the problem child who needed to try harder and be more like your sister. The irony was that I was actually a good student, rarely got into trouble outside the home, and had teachers who consistently praised my behavior, facts that never seemed to penetrate my parents' perception of me. High school brought new dimensions to Kimberly's blame game. When she was 17 and I was 14, our parents bought her a used car for her birthday. 3 weeks later, she swerved into a mailbox while texting her boyfriend. The damage wasn't major, but it would cost several $100s to repair. By the time I arrived home from soccer practice, she had crafted an elaborate story about how I had been arguing with her in the car, grabbing at the radio, and generally being impossible, until she got distracted trying to deal with me. I hadn't even been in the car. I'd been at practice, with 20 witnesses including our coach. For once, I had undeniable proof. When Coach Anderson called that evening to check if I was feeling better after taking that hard fall during drills, my parents realized Kimberly had lied. They confronted her, and she broke down crying, saying she was scared they would take the car away. They didn't. They did make her pay for the repairs, but the incident was quickly forgiven and forgotten, unlike my alleged transgressions, which were brought up at family gatherings for years. My academic achievements became another flashpoint. I worked hard in school, partly because success there was something Kimberly couldn't take from me. When I made the honor roll 3 semesters in a row, Kimberly complained that my obsession with grades made her feel bad about herself and created unhealthy competition in the family. Somehow, my parents interpreted this as me flaunting my grades to hurt my sister, rather than simply doing well in school. Family gatherings became nightmares. At Thanksgiving when I was 16, Aunt Patricia commented on how much I'd grown and how handsome I was becoming. Within minutes, Kimberly was in tears in the kitchen, telling Mom that I had been making fun of her weight when no one was listening. The entire dinner became about comforting Kimberly and giving me disappointed looks, despite my bewildered denials. It was during junior year that I met Jason Miller, who would become my closest friend. Jason came from a large family with 4 siblings, and he recognized the dynamic between Kimberly and me immediately. "Dude, that's not normal," he told me after witnessing one of Kimberly's performances at my house. "My sister and I fight sometimes, but what your sister does is straight-up manipulation." Having someone finally see what was happening gave me the courage to try talking to my parents. I carefully prepared what I wanted to say, practiced with Jason, and approached them one evening when Kimberly was out with friends. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious," I began. "I feel like there's a pattern where Kimberly blames me for things I haven't done, and you always believe her without hearing my side." My father looked uncomfortable. My mother sighed. "Ethan, siblings have conflicts. Kimberly is very sensitive, and sometimes you don't realize how your actions affect her. But that's just it," I tried to explain. "Most of these actions never happened. She makes things up, and you believe her automatically." "That's a very serious accusation," Dad said sternly. "Your sister isn't perfect, but she doesn't lie about you deliberately. Why would she do something like that?" Mom added. "What would she have to gain?" I couldn't answer that question then. I didn't understand the psychology behind Kimberly's behavior, how she'd learned that playing the victim got her attention, sympathy, and power. I just knew it wasn't fair. When Kimberly came home later and found our parents looking troubled, she somehow extracted what had happened. Her response was masterful. She didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, she came to my room with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe you think I would do that to you," she said, voice trembling. "After everything I've done to protect you and look out for you. I know I'm not perfect, but I would never deliberately hurt you, Ethan." The next morning, she told our parents she was worried about Ethan, and thought he might need to talk to someone professional about his paranoia and victim mentality. College became my escape. I chose Northwestern University in Chicago, far enough from Boston that visits home would be limited to major holidays. The distance gave me perspective. I made new friends who took me at face value, who didn't see me through the distorted lens Kimberly had created. I thrived academically and socially, gradually rebuilding my confidence and sense of self. But going home for breaks meant sliding back into old patterns. Kimberly was attending Boston University, still living at home to save money, though a significant portion of her expenses seemed to be covered by our parents. Each visit, I'd resolved to maintain my independence, to not get pulled into her games. Each time, something would happen. A missing piece of jewelry would be found in my luggage, a dent in Dad's car would appear during my visit, a family argument would somehow be traced back to Ethan's attitude. By senior year, I had made a decision. After graduation, I would limit my exposure to my family as much as possible. It wasn't what I wanted, but it seemed necessary for my mental health. After graduation, I accepted a position at a software development company in Chicago. The job was challenging and rewarding, and being 1,500 miles from Boston gave me room to breathe and grow. I rented a small apartment in Wicker Park, made friends, and started building a life that wasn't defined by being Kimberly's scapegoat. Dating, however, proved complicated. The patterns from my childhood had left their mark. I was overly apologetic, quick to assume blame in any conflict, and had trouble trusting that someone could see me accurately. Several promising relationships fizzled because of these issues. Then I met Rebecca Harris at a friend's birthday party. She was smart, compassionate, and direct, a pediatric nurse who didn't have time for games or manipulation. On our third date, I found myself automatically apologizing when the restaurant mixed up our reservation. "Why are you saying sorry?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "This isn't your fault." Something about her question broke through a lifetime of conditioning. Over dinner, I found myself telling her about Kimberly and my family dynamic. I expected disbelief or dismissal. That's what usually happened when I tried to explain it to others. Instead, Rebecca nodded with recognition. "My cousin was like that with her brother. It's a form of narcissistic abuse. You've been gaslit your entire life, Ethan." Having a name for what had happened, and having someone believe me without question, was transformative. With Rebecca's encouragement, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lawson, who specialized in family trauma. Meanwhile, Kimberly's life was progressing along traditional lines. She met Thomas Wilson during her senior year at Boston University, and they married 6 months after graduation. Thomas came from a wealthy family and worked in investment banking. He seemed genuinely nice, if somewhat dazzled by Kimberly's charm and beauty. I cautiously hoped that marriage and adult responsibilities might change the dynamic. For a while, it seemed possible. Our interactions during the rare family gatherings were cordial, if distant. Kimberly was busy establishing herself as the perfect wife, creating an immaculate home, and building relationships with Thomas's influential family. She had new targets for her energy and ambition. Then came Dad's 60th birthday. Mom planned a big celebration at their country club, with family and friends from throughout their lives. I flew in from Chicago with Rebecca, now my girlfriend of 8 months. It was the first time my parents would meet her, and I was both excited and nervous. The evening started well. Rebecca charmed my parents and seemed to get along with Kimberly, who was effusively friendly, a warning sign I should have recognized. Midway through dinner, while Dad was opening gifts, Kimberly clinked her glass for attention. "I have a special announcement," she said, beaming. "Thomas and I are expecting. Dad, you're going to be a grandfather." The room erupted in congratulations. It was genuinely wonderful news, and I was happy for her. After the excitement died down, I approached her to offer my personal congratulations. "I'm really happy for you, Kim. You'll be a great mom." Her smile tightened slightly. "Well, at least one of us is doing something meaningful with our life," she said, just quietly enough that only I could hear. "Still playing with computers while I'm creating a family." I backed away, determined not to let her ruin the evening. Later, when Rebecca and I were dancing, Kimberly approached my mother with tears in her eyes. I couldn't hear what was said, but moments later, Mom was giving me a disappointed look across the room. At brunch the next day, Mom pulled me aside. "Kimberly told me you made some very hurtful comments about her pregnancy and her choice to be a mother instead of pursuing a career. I thought you were past this competitiveness, Ethan." I was stunned. Mom, that never happened. I congratulated her sincerely. She was the one who made a dig about my career. Mom shook her head. She's pregnant, Ethan. This should be a happy time. Why would she make something like that up? It was the same question, 20 years later, with the same inability to consider that Kimberly might not be telling the truth. The pattern continued. When Kimberly lost her part-time job at an interior design firm, allegedly because of cutbacks, though rumors suggested conflicts with colleagues, she somehow implied during a family call that I had criticized her work to a mutual connection in the industry. I worked in software in Chicago and had absolutely no connections to interior design in Boston, but facts didn't matter. The narrative was familiar. Kimberly was the victim, and I was somehow responsible. My sessions with Dr. Harrison, my new therapist after Dr. Lawson moved to Seattle, became increasingly focused on establishing boundaries. You can't change your sister or your parents, she advised. But you can change how you respond to them and what you're willing to accept. I was trying to implement this advice when the truly unbelievable happened. Kimberly called me directly, something she rarely did unless she wanted something, to tell me she'd been fired from her new job at a real estate agency. I know you had something to do with this, she said, her voice icy. Kim, I haven't spoken to anyone in Boston about you. I live in Chicago. I work in tech. How could I possibly have influenced a real estate agency in Boston? Don't play innocent, she snapped. One of the partners mentioned they had heard things about me. The only person who would say negative things is you. The accusation was so irrational that I finally laughed. Kim, this is absurd. I'm sorry you lost your job, but it had nothing to do with me. You've always been jealous of me, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. You'll see, Ethan. This will come back to you. What goes around comes around. She hung up, and I sat in my apartment, shaking my head in disbelief. The incident solidified something I'd been considering for months. It was time to create more distance, more boundaries. My life in Chicago with Rebecca was healthy and positive. My family dynamic was the opposite. When I told Rebecca about the call, she took my hand firmly. Ethan, I love you, and I love that you keep trying to have a relationship with your family. But at some point you have to protect yourself. I knew she was right. But I had no idea that the real test, and the final breaking point, was yet to come. After 2 years together, I proposed to Rebecca during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. She said yes immediately, and we began planning our life together. We decided on a spring wedding in Chicago, where most of our friends lived, with a relatively small guest list of about 80 people. When I called my parents with the news, their response was positive but restrained. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said. We'll need to coordinate with Kimberly, of course. Her schedule is very busy with the baby and her volunteer work. I hadn't even considered that our wedding plans would need to revolve around Kimberly's schedule, but I let it go. We're thinking April next year, I said. Plenty of time to plan. 2 days later, Kimberly called. Mom tells me you're getting married, she said, not bothering with congratulations. I think it's best if I serve as Rebecca's maid of honor. I have experience with wedding planning, and I can make sure everything goes smoothly. I was speechless for a moment. Kim, Rebecca has a sister and 3 close friends. She'll choose her own bridal party. That's short-sighted, Ethan. I'm trying to help. Besides, it would look strange to everyone if your only sister wasn't included. You'll be included as a guest, I said firmly. Rebecca and I will plan our wedding our way. I could practically hear her eyes narrowing. I see. Well, don't come crying to me when everything falls apart because you refused my help. When I relayed this conversation to Rebecca, she was baffled. We've met exactly 3 times at family events. Why would she think she'd be my maid of honor? The question hung in the air, both of us knowing the answer, because Kimberly always had to be the center of attention, always had to control the narrative. As the wedding approached, Kimberly's interference escalated. She called our selected vendors with updates to our plans. She contacted Rebecca's mother with concerns about the guest list. She even reached out to Rebecca's maid of honor, Lauren, to suggest changes to the bachelorette party plans. Each time, we re-established boundaries, corrected the misinformation, and tried to move forward. My parents, predictably, saw nothing wrong with Kimberly's behavior. "She's just excited for you," Mom insisted. "She wants your day to be perfect." The rehearsal dinner, hosted by my parents the night before the wedding, became Kimberly's stage. She arrived in a white dress that could easily have been mistaken for a wedding gown, immediately drawing attention from everyone. During dinner, she clinked her glass and stood for what became a 15-minute speech, not about Rebecca and me, but about her own wedding, her insights into marriage, and thinly veiled criticisms disguised as advice. "Ethan has always needed guidance to make the right decisions," she said, smiling at the increasingly uncomfortable guests. "I'm just so glad he finally found someone willing to take on that responsibility." Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder not to engage. We'd agreed that nothing was worth ruining our wedding weekend. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, but the problems began immediately. The flowers delivered to the venue were completely wrong, all white lilies instead of the spring mix we'd ordered. The caterer called in a panic because they'd been told the reception was cancelled. The photographer was 2 hours late because someone had called to reschedule the start time. Each issue was traced back to mysterious calls made from a blocked number. We scrambled to fix everything, and thanks to our amazing friends and Rebecca's unflappable sister, most problems were resolved before the ceremony. But during the reception, Kimberly made her move. As the best man finished his toast, she stood and took the microphone unexpectedly. "I'd like to say a few words about my brother," she began, her voice thick with emotion that I recognized as completely manufactured. "Ethan and I have had our ups and downs, as all siblings do. But I've always tried to guide him and protect him, even when he resented it." The room grew uncomfortable as she continued, painting herself as the long-suffering sister and me as the difficult brother who finally found his way, thanks to her influence and example. She even managed to imply that she had introduced Rebecca and me, taking credit for our relationship. Finally, she raised her glass with dramatic flair. "To my little brother, who has overcome so much, and to Rebecca, who has taken on more than she knows. May your marriage be as blessed as mine." The tepid applause that followed was excruciating. Rebecca's family, meeting my sister for essentially the first time, were visibly confused and concerned. My stomach knotted as I realized Kimberly had succeeded in tainting our perfect day with her narrative. Later, as Rebecca and I were preparing to leave for our honeymoon, Kimberly cornered me near the coat check. Her eyes were cold despite her smile. "Congratulations, little brother. I hope you appreciate everything I did to make this day special." "You mean the sabotaged flowers? The confused caterer? The late photographer?" I replied quietly. She blinked innocently. "I have no idea what you're talking about. But it's sad that on your wedding day, you're still trying to blame me for your problems. Kim, I know it was you. Everyone knows it was you. You're not fooling anyone anymore." Her expression hardened. "Be careful, Ethan. Family is forever. Rebecca might not always be around, but I'll always be your sister." It felt like a threat. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared at my side. "Everything okay here?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she knew it wasn't. "Just giving my brother some marriage advice," Kimberly said, smile back in place. "Congratulations again. We should have dinner when you get back. I have a business opportunity I want to discuss with both of you." As we drove to the hotel, I was uncharacteristically quiet. Rebecca finally broke the silence. "That speech was something else. I'm so sorry," I said. "I should have expected she'd try something. Ethan, this isn't your fault. But we need to talk about boundaries with your sister when we get back." I nodded, knowing she was right but also dreading the confrontation that would follow. We returned from our honeymoon in Hawaii to several voicemails from Kimberly about her exciting business opportunity. When we finally met for dinner, she laid out her plan, She wanted to start an interior design business focusing on high-end homes in Boston's affluent suburbs. She needed investors and thought Rebecca and I should get in on the ground floor. "I'll handle all the creative and client-facing work," she explained. "I just need some startup capital and maybe some help with the website and tech side." She looked pointedly at me. "How much are you looking for?" Rebecca asked neutrally. "Just $50,000 to start," Kimberly said, as if requesting pocket change. "Plus your technical expertise, Ethan. I'd make you both partners, of course. 20% each." I nearly choked on my water. "Kim, that's a lot of money for a business with no clients, no portfolio, and no concrete plan." Her eyes narrowed. "I have connections, Ethan. My volunteer work has put me in contact with exactly the right clientele. This could be huge. But if you don't believe in me..." "It's not about believing in you," I tried to explain. "It's about sound business practices." "I see," she said coldly. "You've always been jealous of my creative talents. You'd rather see me fail than help me succeed." And there it was. The familiar twist, the rewriting of reality where my legitimate concerns became character flaws, where her unreasonable requests became tests of loyalty that I was failing. Rebecca and I declined politely but firmly. The dinner ended with Kimberly in tears, claiming we were undermining her dreams just as she was trying to create a better life for her child. My parents called the next day, disappointed that we weren't supporting family. It was the final straw. On the drive home, I made a decision that would change everything. "I'm done," I told Rebecca. "I'm done defending myself. I'm done trying to prove my innocence. I'm done fighting against her narrative." Rebecca glanced at me with concern. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for once in my life, I'm going to give Kimberly exactly what she wants. And then I'm going to step back and let whatever happens happen." Little did I know that this decision would lead to consequences beyond anything I could have imagined. The next morning, I called Dr. Harrison and scheduled an emergency session. When I explained what I was considering, she leaned forward with interest. "What exactly are you planning, Ethan?" "I'm going to stop fighting Kimberly's narrative. I'm going to give her the control she wants over this business venture, help her get the loan she's asking for, and then step back completely." Dr. Harrison considered this carefully. "This isn't about revenge, is it?" "No," I said honestly. "It's about stopping an unhealthy cycle. I've spent my life trying to prove my innocence, trying to get people to see the truth. It's never worked. So what if I just stop trying? Setting boundaries is healthy," she acknowledged. "But enabling destructive behavior isn't. What's your actual goal here?" I thought about it. "Freedom," I finally said. "Freedom from being responsible for Kimberly's feelings and actions. Freedom from the guilt and defensiveness that's defined my life." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. "Just be careful that in trying to free yourself, you don't become something you don't recognize. Healthy boundaries don't require deception or manipulation." I took her words to heart as Rebecca and I discussed the plan that evening. Rebecca, with her clear-eyed pragmatism, helped refine my thinking. "If we do this, we need legal protection," she pointed out. "Whatever investment we make needs proper documentation and clear terms." "Agreed," I said. "And we need to be prepared for this to go badly. Kimberly has never successfully managed anything long-term. Are you okay with that? With potentially losing the investment?" I considered the question seriously. "I think of it as the cost of freedom. We can afford it financially. The question is whether we can afford to keep going as we have been." Rebecca understood. The emotional toll of the past few years, particularly the wedding sabotage, had affected her too. "Let's do it right then." Eyes open, expectations realistic, boundaries firm. The next day, I called Kimberly. "I've been thinking about your business proposal," I said. "Rebecca and I would like to discuss it further." Her surprise quickly gave way to smugness. "I knew you'd come around. You're smart enough to recognize a good opportunity when you see it." We arranged a meeting with Kimberly and Thomas for the following weekend. In the meantime, I consulted with a business attorney, Craig Daniels, who specialized in small business formations. I was completely transparent about the situation. Normally, I'd advise against going into business with family, especially given what you've told me, Craig said frankly. But if you're determined to proceed, we'll create the most bulletproof agreement possible. He drafted a detailed operating agreement that specified roles, responsibilities, profit distribution, and, most importantly, limited liability. Rebecca and I would be silent investors only, with no day-to-day responsibilities or liabilities beyond our initial investment. When we presented these terms to Kimberly and Thomas, Kimberly immediately objected. "This makes it seem like you don't trust me," she complained. "It's standard business practice," I replied calmly. "It protects everyone involved." Thomas, who worked in finance, nodded. "He's right, honey. This is pretty standard stuff." Kimberly wasn't satisfied. "But I want Ethan involved in the operations. I need his technical expertise. I can help set up your initial systems," I conceded. "But my job and life are in Chicago. I can't be involved in day-to-day operations in Boston." After much negotiation, we reached an agreement. Rebecca and I would invest $30,000, less than Kimberly wanted but still significant. I would help set up her website, client management system, and digital marketing framework. Beyond that, the business would be entirely hers to run. Kimberly signed the agreement with a triumphant smile, clearly feeling she had won some important victory. Perhaps in her mind she had finally made me acknowledge her vision and capabilities. What she didn't realize was that my signature represented something entirely different, my first step toward true independence. Over the next month, I worked remotely to build Kimberly's business infrastructure. I created a professional website, set up accounting software, implemented a customer relationship management system, and established basic digital marketing channels. I documented everything meticulously and created simple tutorials for ongoing management. During our final handoff call, Kimberly was uncharacteristically appreciative. "This is really impressive, Ethan. It's exactly what I needed. I'm glad it meets your expectations," I said. "Remember, all the documentation is in the shared drive, and there's a list of recommended consultants if you need technical help going forward. I'm sure I'll figure it out," she said confidently. "This is going to be huge, Ethan. You'll see. You made the right choice investing with me." "I hope so," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, part of me genuinely wanted Kimberly to succeed, to find fulfillment that didn't depend on manipulating others. After that call, I stepped back completely. When Kimberly called with technical questions, I referred her to the documentation or the list of consultants. When she complained about difficulties with clients or vendors, I expressed sympathy but offered no solutions. When she suggested I fly to Boston to help with a small issue, with the website, I politely declined, citing work commitments. My parents called, concerned that I wasn't being supportive enough of Kimberly's venture. I explained calmly that I had fulfilled all my agreed-upon obligations and that Kimberly needed to run her business independently. "But she's your sister," Mom protested. "Family helps family." "I have helped," I pointed out. "I've invested money, built her technical infrastructure, and provided resources for ongoing support. The rest is up to her." Dad was surprisingly thoughtful. "You know, your sister has always relied heavily on others. Maybe it is time she stood on her own 2 feet." It was the first time I could remember my father acknowledging, even indirectly, Kimberly's pattern of dependency. It gave me hope that perhaps, with enough distance and perspective, my parents might eventually see the larger pattern as well. Meanwhile, Rebecca and I focused on our life in Chicago. We bought a small house in Ravenswood, adopted a golden retriever named Max, and settled into the comfortable rhythms of married life. I was promoted to senior developer at my company, and Rebecca became the nurse manager of her pediatric unit. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I no longer jumped when my phone rang with my parents' number. I no longer spent hours defending myself against Kimberly's latest accusations. I no longer felt responsible for her emotions or actions. I had given her exactly what she wanted: control, validation, and support on her terms. Now it was up to her what she did with it. 6 months after our investment, the first signs of trouble appeared. Thomas called me directly, something he'd never done before. "Ethan, I'm concerned about some of Kimberly's business decisions," he said without preamble. "She's signed leases for both office space and a warehouse, but she only has 3 clients so far. The burn rate is unsustainable." I kept my response neutral. "Have you discussed this with her?" He sighed heavily. "I've tried. She says I don't understand her vision or the luxury design market. Maybe she's right, it's not my field. But the numbers don't add up." "What would you like me to do?" I asked. "Could you talk to her? She respects your business acumen, even if she doesn't always admit it." It was a pivotal moment. The old Ethan would have rushed in, trying to fix things, desperate to prevent disaster. The new Ethan recognized this as a boundary issue. "Thomas, I understand your concerns, but Kimberly and I agreed that I wouldn't be involved in operational decisions. This is something you two need to work out together." There was a long pause. "I see," he finally said. "I respect that. I just thought, given your history." "Our history is exactly why I need to maintain this boundary," I said gently. "I'm happy to listen if you need to vent, but I can't intervene in Kimberly's business." The next update came from my mother a month later. "Your sister is working so hard on her business," she gushed. "She's hired 2 assistants and an office manager. She says they're about to sign several major contracts." I murmured appropriately positive responses while wondering about the wisdom of expanding staff before securing revenue. But again, I maintained my boundary. This was Kimberly's business to run as she saw fit. 8 months in, Kimberly herself called, sounding stressed. "Ethan, there's something wrong with the accounting software you set up. It's showing that we're losing money, but that can't be right. We have 5 clients now, all paying premium rates. The software just reflects the numbers entered into it," I explained. "If your expenses exceed your revenue, it will show a loss. But we've invested in quality inventory and staff," she insisted. "These are necessary expenses to project the right image to our clientele." "That may be true, but they're still expenses. If they exceed your income, you're operating at a loss." She made an impatient sound. "This is why I wanted you more involved. You understand these technical details. Can't you fly out for a weekend and fix things?" "There's nothing to fix, Kim. The software is working correctly. This is a business strategy question, not a technical issue." The conversation ended with her frustrated and me feeling a mix of concern and resignation. I shared the details with Rebecca that evening. "She's heading for trouble, isn't she?" Rebecca asked. "It sounds like it. She's operating on the fake it till you make it principle, but with real money, including ours." Rebecca squeezed my hand. "We knew this was a possibility. We agreed on the amount we were willing to lose." I nodded, grateful once again for her steadiness and clarity. The situation deteriorated rapidly after that. Through my parents and occasionally Thomas, I heard about mounting problems: vendors demanding payment, clients unhappy with delays and budget overruns, staff turning over frequently. Kimberly had apparently developed a reputation in the Boston design community for being difficult to work with and financially unreliable. 10 months after our investment, the business officially imploded. Kimberly had taken on a project for a wealthy client in Beacon Hill, ordering expensive custom furniture and decor from Italy and France. When the items arrived, they were wrong for the space. Something an experienced designer would have anticipated. The client refused to pay for items they couldn't use, but the vendors still demanded payment. The resulting cash flow crisis forced Kimberly to close the business abruptly, leaving several projects unfinished and multiple creditors unpaid. Our investment was gone, as expected, but the limited liability agreement protected us from the additional debts Kimberly had accumulated. What I hadn't anticipated was Kimberly's reaction. Instead of accepting responsibility for her business decisions, she immediately looked for someone to blame. And her target, predictably, was me. "You set me up to fail," she accused during a blistering phone call. "You knew the systems you put in place wouldn't work for a creative business. You wanted me to look bad." "Kim, I implemented standard business systems used by thousands of design firms," I replied calmly. "The problems weren't technical, they were operational and financial." "You turned Thomas against me too," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "He keeps talking about fiscal responsibility and realistic projections. That's you talking through him. Those are basic business concepts, Kim. Thomas works in finance. He understands these principles without any input from me." But Kimberly was beyond rational discussion. In her mind, her business failure couldn't possibly be due to her own decisions or actions. It had to be someone else's fault. And I was her preferred scapegoat, as always. What happened next surprised me. When Kimberly tried to sell this narrative to our parents, my father pushed back. "Kimberly," he said during a family call I was part of, "Ethan fulfilled every obligation outlined in your agreement. He invested money he'll never get back. He built systems that worked perfectly well. He even provided resources for ongoing support. How exactly did he set you up to fail?" Kimberly was momentarily speechless, unused to having her version of events questioned by our father. She quickly recovered with tears. "You don't understand how subtle it was, Dad. He knew I'm not technically minded. He deliberately made things too complicated." Mom jumped in with her usual enabling response. "I'm sure Ethan didn't mean to make things difficult, honey. He probably just didn't realize that not everyone understands computers the way he does." But Dad wasn't satisfied. "I've seen the documentation Ethan created. It was clear, thorough, and actually quite simple to follow. I think we need to consider that the business failed for other reasons." It was the first time in my life that my father had directly contradicted Kimberly's narrative and partially supported mine. The impact was immediate. Kimberly ended the call abruptly, claiming she had a migraine coming on. In the weeks that followed, Kimberly's attempts to blame me for her business failure gained little traction. Thomas, having seen the whole situation unfold, wasn't buying it. My parents, particularly my father, were finally beginning to recognize the pattern. Even Kimberly's friends, who had heard her blame me for everything for years, seemed skeptical of this latest accusation. Without her usual support system reinforcing her narrative, Kimberly's behavior became increasingly erratic. She missed family gatherings, then claimed she wasn't invited. She sent long, rambling emails at 3 a.m. accusing various people of conspiring against her. She posted vague but clearly accusatory statements on social media, then deleted them hours later. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving dinner. My parents had convinced Rebecca and me to fly to Boston for the holiday, assuring us that Kimberly was doing better and wanted to reconnect. Reluctantly, we agreed. The dinner started awkwardly but civilly. Kimberly was subdued, almost withdrawn, which was so unlike her that it put everyone on edge. Then, as Dad was carving the turkey, she suddenly stood up. "I can't do this anymore," she announced. "I can't sit here pretending everything is normal when my own family betrayed me." "Kim, please," Mom began, but Kimberly cut her off. "No, they need to hear this. Ethan deliberately sabotaged my business. He was jealous of my potential success. He turned all of you against me. And none of you had the loyalty to stand by me." The table fell silent. Then Thomas spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "Kim, that's not what happened. The business failed because of poor planning and financial decisions. Ethan had nothing to do with that." "You too?" she gasped, looking genuinely shocked. "After everything I've done for you? For this family? I've always been the one holding everything together, making everyone look good, covering for everyone's mistakes. Especially yours, Ethan." It was such a complete inversion of reality that I couldn't help but laugh, a short, incredulous sound that escaped before I could stop it. Kimberly's face contorted with rage. You think this is funny? My life is falling apart, and you're laughing? I'm not laughing at your pain, I said quietly. I'm reacting to the absurdity of what you just said. You've spent your entire life blaming me for your mistakes, Kim. Not covering for mine. That's a lie, she shouted. Mom, Dad, tell him. Tell him how I've always protected him, always looked out for him. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Kimberly, I think we all need to be honest here. There has been a pattern in this family for many years. We, your mother and I, allowed it to continue because it was easier than confronting it. That was our failure as parents. Kimberly stared at him in disbelief. What are you saying? I'm saying that Ethan is right. You've had a habit of blaming him for things that weren't his fault. We enabled that behavior by believing you without question. It wasn't fair to him, and ultimately, it wasn't good for you either. Mom was crying silently, but she nodded in agreement. We should have been more balanced in how we listened to both of you. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry, Kimberly. Kimberly looked from one parent to the other, then to Thomas, who was watching her with sad eyes. Finally, her gaze landed on me. But instead of the remorse or recognition I might have hoped for, I saw only betrayal and fury. So this is how it ends, she said, her voice deadly quiet. My entire family turns against me because of him. Congratulations, Ethan. You finally won. She stormed out, ignoring Thomas's calls to wait. We heard her car start and accelerate down the driveway, gravel spraying against the garage door. The rest of the meal was somber and awkward. Thomas apologized repeatedly before leaving to find Kimberly. My parents looked shell-shocked, as if they were seeing their family clearly for the first time and didn't recognize it. As Rebecca and I prepared to leave for our hotel, Dad pulled me aside. I'm sorry, son. I should have seen this years ago. It's okay, Dad, I said, surprised to find that I meant it. It was a complicated situation. We were all doing the best we could with what we understood at the time. He clasped my shoulder, his eyes moist. When did you get so wise? I smiled faintly. Probably around the time I stopped trying to control things I couldn't control. In the months that followed, Kimberly withdrew from family contact almost completely. She refused to attend Christmas, declined calls, and responded to messages with one-word answers. According to Thomas, who maintained occasional contact with my parents, she was seeing a therapist but was still processing a lot of anger. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the truth had finally been acknowledged, sadness for the relationship with my sister that I'd never really had, concern for her well-being, and a lingering sense of guilt that I had contributed to her current state by giving her exactly what she wanted instead of what she needed. Dr. Harrison helped me work through these feelings. You didn't cause her problems, she reminded me. You simply stopped participating in an unhealthy dynamic. The rest was inevitable. And perhaps that was the hardest lesson, that sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. 6 months after the Thanksgiving confrontation, my mother called with unexpected news. Kimberly has asked if we would all attend a family therapy session with her. Her therapist, Dr. Winters, thinks it might be helpful. I was surprised and somewhat skeptical. All of us? Including me? Especially you, I think, Mom said cautiously. She mentioned wanting to address some things directly with you. I discussed it with Rebecca and Dr. Harrison. Both supported the idea, though Dr. Harrison cautioned me to maintain realistic expectations. This could be a significant step toward healing, or it could be another attempt at manipulation. Go in with an open mind but firm boundaries. The session was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in Boston. Rebecca came with me for support, though she would wait outside during the actual therapy. When we arrived at Dr. Winter's office, my parents were already there, looking nervous. Thomas arrived shortly after us, explaining that Kimberly wanted to come separately. When Kimberly finally entered, I was struck by how different she looked. Always immaculately put together, She now appeared somewhat disheveled, with no makeup and her hair pulled back carelessly. She avoided eye contact with everyone as she took a seat across from me. Dr. Winters, a calm, authoritative woman in her 50s, began by establishing ground rules. Each person would have uninterrupted time to speak. We would use I statements. We would focus on moving forward rather than assigning blame. My father spoke first, expressing regret for his role in enabling unhealthy family dynamics. My mother followed, tearfully acknowledging how she had often prioritized keeping peace over addressing real issues. Thomas spoke about his gradual realization of the patterns in our family, and his struggle to support Kimberly while not reinforcing harmful behaviors. When my turn came, I kept it simple. I spent most of my life feeling responsible for Kimberly's happiness and defending myself against accusations. It was exhausting and damaging. I want a healthier relationship with my sister, but it has to be based on mutual respect and honesty. Finally, it was Kimberly's turn. She looked down at her hands for a long moment before speaking. I hate this, she began bluntly. I hate sitting here. I hate feeling like the villain in my own family story. I hate that everyone seems to think I'm some kind of monster who deliberately hurt Ethan our whole lives. She took a shaky breath. But Dr. Winters has been helping me see that there's a difference between what I intended and the impact of my actions. And the impact was not good. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing I'd ever heard from her. She continued, still not meeting anyone's eyes. I've always felt like I had to be perfect. Like anything less than perfection meant I was worthless. When things went wrong, I couldn't bear to take responsibility because it felt like admitting I was fundamentally flawed. So I found someone else to blame. And Ethan was convenient. She glanced up at me briefly, then away. I'm not saying this to excuse what I did. I'm trying to explain it. I've spent my life terrified of being seen as a failure. When the business collapsed, it confirmed my worst fear, that I wasn't special or talented or destined for greatness. Just ordinary. Maybe even below average. Dr. Winters gently prompted her. And how did that realization affect you, Kimberly? It broke me, she said simply. Everything I thought about myself, everything I'd built my identity around, just shattered. And I didn't know who I was without it. She finally looked directly at me. I'm not ready to forgive you for exposing that truth, Ethan. But Dr. Winters says that's backwards thinking. That you didn't expose anything, my own actions did. And that eventually, I might even be grateful for the wake-up call. I'm not there yet. It wasn't a full apology or acknowledgement of everything that had happened between us. But it was honest in a way Kimberly had never been before. And perhaps that was more valuable than a rehearsed apology that didn't reflect true understanding. Dr. Winters guided us through a discussion of how we might interact going forward. Kimberly was clear that she needed space. I'm still figuring out who I am without the stories I've told myself. I can't do that and maintain intense family connections at the same time. I respected that. I think healthy distance makes sense. But I'd like to leave the door open for a different kind of relationship in the future, if and when you're ready. We agreed on minimal, structured contact for the time being. Holiday cards, occasional text messages on birthdays or significant dates, perhaps a brief family gathering once or twice a year. No expectations of immediate closeness or complete resolution. As the session ended, Kimberly approached me hesitantly. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry, Ethan. Not for everything, not yet. But for enough to start with. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. And I'm sorry too, not for setting boundaries, but for the way it happened. I could have been more direct earlier. She nodded, then turned to leave with Thomas. Before exiting, she paused. The business was a mistake. But you didn't sabotage it. I did that all by myself. With that acknowledgement, she was gone. The healing process continued slowly over the next 2 years. Rebecca and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Lily. My parents came to Chicago for the birth and stayed for 2 weeks, helping us adjust to parenthood. Their relationship with me had deepened since the therapy session, becoming more authentic and equal. Kimberly sent a beautiful baby gift with a simple note. "Congratulations. She's lucky to have you as her father. You always were good at taking care of others." 6 months later, we received an invitation to a small gathering at Kimberly and Thomas's home. They had moved to a more modest house in the suburbs and were celebrating Kimberly's completion of a certification program in event planning, a more structured approach to her interest in design that seemed to suit her better. The visit was awkward but civil. Kimberly was different, more subdued, less performative. She actually listened when others spoke and asked questions that indicated genuine interest rather than opportunities to redirect attention to herself. When her son knocked over a glass of juice and she automatically glanced at me, we both recognized the old pattern and shared a moment of unexpected humor. "Not blaming you for that one," she said with a small smile. "Progress, right?" "Definite progress," I agreed. As Rebecca and I drove to the airport the next day, she asked how I was feeling. Peaceful, I realized. Not because everything is resolved or perfect, but because I'm no longer trapped in that dynamic. Kimberly will always be Kimberly, but I don't have to be defined by her actions or perceptions anymore. The experience taught me several profound lessons. First, that we cannot change others, only how we respond to them. For years, I had tried to make Kimberly see the truth, to make my parents understand the dynamics at play. Nothing changed until I changed my own behavior. Second, that enabling someone's harmful patterns isn't kindness, it's complicity. By always defending myself, always trying to prove my innocence, I had paradoxically reinforced Kimberly's belief that her problems were external, not internal. Third, that true freedom comes not from controlling circumstances but from letting go of the need for control. When I stopped trying to manage Kimberly's perceptions and my parents' beliefs, I found liberation. And finally, that healing is rarely neat or complete. Kimberly and I will never have the close sibling relationship I might have wished for. My parents will always carry regret for their role in our dysfunctional family system. But we can all move forward with greater awareness and intention, creating something healthier than what came before. As I look at my daughter, I am committed to breaking the cycle. She will grow up in a home where mistakes are acknowledged, where responsibility is taken, where blame is not a weapon used to protect the ego. She will learn that being imperfect is not only acceptable but fundamentally human. And perhaps that's the ultimate resolution. Not that the past is erased or that all wounds are perfectly healed, but that the painful patterns stop with us, allowing something better to begin. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see their own patterns? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the kindest thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to stop participating in harmful dynamics, even when it's difficult.